I just recently made a fun connection between a verse in Revelation that points back to a verse in creation. And of course, yes, as the title implies, the tree of life. This is a fun one. My name is Dan Paulson. Everybody, welcome to the video. When I interpret this, I'm going to fair warn everybody, or provide fair warning, that it's not going to be a religious interpretation. This is not going to be something that you worship. This is going to be something that's going to teach us something about ourselves. It needs to be something that's mentally interactive, something that we understand. I'm going to interpret to that layer. That is the way the stories are made. This cryptic verbiage that's being worshipped, that's the carrier shell. That is what they're going to talk about in church. If you are a certain individual that understands there's something deeper in here, there's something that's interactive. Okay, what is the verse? And let's get into it. First of all, let's read the one in Revelation. If I get here, I've got the King James Version. We go through chapter 1, and then chapter 2 is where we have it down here in verse 7. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit said to the churches. To him that overcometh, I will give you to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. What is that midst of the paradise of God? That's the Garden of Eden. There's the tree of life. We left that behind in Genesis. Let's go and find out how that starts. What is this? It's telling us to eat of that tree. What were we told in Genesis? King James Version again. We're going to get through the first creation story and get into the second creation story. And verse 9 is where the first reference is made. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So there's two trees, the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Both of those there. Later there's a reference again, however, that doesn't talk about that, but says this, And the Lord God commanded, said to the man, saying, Of every tree in the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of that, for in the day that you eat that you shall surely die. Okay, we could have eaten, or she could have eaten from the tree of life. That would have been okay, but she did not. She ate, as the story goes. Okay, now how do we understand these? At the deepest layer, at the psychological layer, we have to interact with the story. And to do so, the only way this works is that Adam and Eve and creation story does not represent the creation of the universe, of the world, of earth, of life, of mankind. It represents the creation of each one of us. It represents, when I read it, that's the story of me. That's the story of my life. If you read it, that's the story of you. It's the story of your life. We have a conscious, we have a subconscious where we store all of our things, and we have a higher self where we stay disconnected from the memories. We start with those. That's the God, and the consciousness is there. Adam and God together. Eve isn't there yet. Why? We don't have an inner self yet. Think back on your life when you were a little kid. You don't even remember it. Don't even have memories of it. Eve wasn't there yet. As life goes on, however, what happens? We're told what this implies as we play this out is that go live life. However, don't judge life. If you do, you're going to start having cyclical pain, and you're going to live off the fruits of your labor. You're not going to live from a higher self. You could have eaten of the tree of life. What would the tree of life be? That's living someplace, growing up in an environment where you're taught to not judge, in a monastic or some sort of a home life where you are taught from the get-go, don't be that way. Don't judge like that. Don't do these things. That would have been eating from the tree of life, and then you never become this frazzled wreck, this world that needs to be destroyed. So consuming of the tree of life would have represented we didn't go bad. We learned life without judging life bad. But that's not what happens to us, does it? No, we actually, all of us, consume from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That gives us our memories and our emotions. Every time we eat from that, that's consuming something new. This is a new experience. I hate that. Oh, you this, you that. All of these is consuming from there. And then we begin to have cyclical issues as a result. So when we get back down, all the way down into Revelation, what it's telling us again. Let's look at it again. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. To him that overcometh I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Okay, the Garden of Eden was a mental state. That was a place that we were living in, that we were happy. That represents that right there. He that have an ear, let him hear. If you're the kind of person that can understand this, there's something internal. The Spirit says to the churches, the inner self, the things you need to rectify. To him that overcome, I will give to eat of the tree of life. We need to overcome. That would be the same thing as clearing the mote out of your eye or forgiving the ought against your brother. To him that overcomes, I will give you the eat of the tree of life. That's the same thing as saying to him that forgives the ought against his brother, and then you leave your gift at the altar, your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret. This is a reverbage replicated teaching that is common throughout the Bible. But this one points back to that. Of course, it goes on and it teaches how to do that. I don't want this video to get too long. People don't have time today to watch them. But I just wanted to make that connection. So yeah, this is not telling us how to do it, but it's telling us you go back to this point where you did not... well, we did. We consumed from the tree, and we want to have better lives. We're frazzled. We're hanging on to things. We need to learn to let that stuff go and get back to that point where we are now living from the tree of life and not from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it's actually a little thicker than that. If you think it through, consuming from the tree of life, consuming spiritually, learning. I'm learning what to do. So if I'm consuming from the knowledge of good and evil, I'm living and eating mentally, consuming life that is good and evil. Consuming from the tree of life is learning that and learning to extract yourself from that. It's not just being better. It's learning how to be better. You're actually having to consume. You're actually having to learn. So it's deeper than it even, when you look at it and extract it all, there's something at that layer that's interactive. This is what emerges from us. The trees are what emerges from our gardens. Same as figs and thistles and figs. You can change up the analogous verbiage, but it always means the same thing. What grows in your garden? Roses or, any, whatever. They're all things in the mind that are analogous, representations. And in this case, it's the same thing. If you don't interpret it, there's some way of looking at it outward that is for most people. In fact, in this interpretation process, we understand some other things. If people are using revelation and saying this is going to continue, this is happening any day now, they're going to continue to do that till the end of time. They're going to continue to believe it's about ready to happen any day now. That's just the way the human psychology works. If, however, you understand what Jesus says when he said to his disciples, I will return before all of you have died. What? That's metaphorical. That's somebody following the path. That is somebody who is getting back to the tree of life. That's the actual return. The return happens every time somebody follows Jesus' path. The people who worship him are generally not following the path. They're worshiping him. Imagine the Buddha teaches what to do. What people say, I don't want to do what you're doing. I just want to worship you as a god. That's exactly what happened to Jesus, except it was set up by the Romans to be that way. It gathers a lot of people. It does. It gathers a lot of people, but it looks outward to the physical. It doesn't look inward to where it belongs. Yet, it's always there. Honestly, that's the many called standing outside the narrow gate. The narrow gate's up here. Once you turn it inward and make it yours, you've got to do that by yourself. It's a solitary operation to turn inward and resolve the ought against your brother or get back to the tree of life. All of this is very deep mental teachings that are held in a way that are difficult to interpret. And if you don't interpret them, they can make perfect sense in the physical world that drives people that are not, if you were to say something like it's okay to destroy, you need to destroy your enemies, people would think that, okay, those are my enemies, I need to destroy them. If you turn it inward and you would say, you know what, it's not about the physical world, it's about my world up here. The enemies are the things that I carry, the skeletons in my closet, the weeds in my garden. All of those are going to be representations of the same thing, stuff emerging from us all the time that is not okay. These are all about us. When you get to that interpretation layer, it's about how to find your inner peace and to connect with God mentally, as opposed to looking outward, having, sensations sometimes, thinking that you have a spiritual connection, but not really realizing what that entails. How do you be poor? How do you be poor in spirit? How do the meek inherit the earth? It has to be up here. It cannot be out there. Think about it. You look at it and go, phew, I'm not going to be poor. It doesn't make sense. Meek, what? You get walked on. It's about this world up here. You got to be poor, devoid of. You got to let that stuff go. Meek. You got to let yourself off the hook. You got to turn inward and find a way to resolve this stuff. The only way that those verses make sense is when you interpret them and put them into the mind and make them mentally interactive as far as I'm concerned. This is based on my experience in life, and I have interacted with the verses in the very manner that I'm interpreting here, and they did change my life. So my Father who sees in secret rewarded me in secret, or my flow in the Tao automatically improved. Both are fine. They both mean the same thing. It just depends on what you want to believe and how you want to, or what you want to attribute it to. But at the end of the day, if you don't do the work up here, that doesn't happen out there. Doesn't matter what you believe in. Without doing the work, it doesn't change the life. The belief doesn't matter. A belief can make you feel better, but it doesn't necessarily heal things from the past. You still carry it with you. And it continues to affect life. If you learn to turn inward, this is about resolving that. Those are the weeds in the garden. Those are the things that are, the demons that possess us. All right, that's my interpretation. Tree of life, back to the letting go of the agreements. See you in the next video. I put this on the end only for those who are looking for really to see how these motifs compare and how advanced they are. This consuming of the tree of life appears elsewhere in other Old Testament stories, but it doesn't sound the same, but it's doing the same thing. It's a conceptual thing. Let's just look at them and talk about them. I just combined them. I copied and pasted them here. I've got one from Genesis and Revelation, the two we just talked about. There's the tree of life. The tree of life was the learning we could have had, but we didn't. We consumed from the other one. We could have consumed from the tree of life. It was not forbidden. It was not at all, but that's not what we did. Later down here in Revelation, we're told to eat of the tree of life. If we were to read Jeremiah, it's going to sound different. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 9, and the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said to me, behold, I have put words in your mouth. You know what? That's how Muhammad was told too. Ezekiel chapter 2 and 3. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent to me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. And he spread it before me, and it was written within and without, and there was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. Okay, what is this book? Look at your life. Look at your experiences, the pain, the shame, the hurt, the desires unfulfilled, the regrets. That's the lamentations, mourning, and woe. What do we do about it? How do we resolve that stuff? Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, eat that you find this roll and go speak to the house of Israel. Now, this is made in such a way that if you don't turn it inward, it's going to be a story that fits your culture. But if you know it's for you, the house of Israel, the bad house of Israel, is your inner self. It's being represented as that. You must go in and rectify the house of Israel. This is your story, and that's how it's held. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. This is eating of the tree of life, eating that roll. This is what to do. And he said to me, Son of man, cause your belly to eat and fill your bowels with this roll that I give you. Then I did eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. Now we know what to do to heal our lives. This is the most complex one I find. Joshua chapter 1. The book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night, and that you may observe to do all that is written therein. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Yep, we know what we're supposed to do. We need to abide by it. We don't. We give in. We fall off course. And finally, down in Exodus, the most famous one. And the Lord said to Moses, come to me on the mount, and when you're there, I will give you the tables of stone and a law and commandments, which I have written, and thou mayest teach them. So in the same way up here, you have to go rectify the house of Israel. Down here, you're taking care of the Israelites. It's the same motif. All of these represent the knowledge of how to live correctly, even though we don't in the beginning. Okay, that's it.